Okay, we're going to take a look at the history of machine notes. We're getting into simple machines and how we can use all that math we've learned to make things easier to move. And then when we've done a quick look at just the review of like some of the math, we're going to take a look at like the 20 greatest inventions that really impacted humans and how we've come to be, right? And things like fire, simple things like that, the wheel, that kind of stuff. Uh, what has allowed us to do things like live longer, uh, live healthier? So that's what we're going to take a quick look at. But before we do that, let's take a look about what is a machine. Well, it's a device that increases or decreases the force or change in the direction of force. Simple machines are literally all around us. They change the amount, distance, force, or direction to do work. And work is the force needed to move an object through a distance. So that's right there. We have work equals force times distance. Mechanical advantage is what we also find with simple machines. So in other words, mechanical advantage is really the load we lift divided by how much effort it takes to lift it. So the less it takes to lift it, the easier it is to move that load that you've put in. Like a wheelbarrow is a simple machine. It's a lever, and it's got a specific class of lever that we'll learn about. And basically what it's doing is you put that heavy object in the bucket. You've got a wheel in the front, so the fulcrum is in the front, the pivot point, and you lift it, and you hope that you're not having to lift the entire weight. And we'll figure that one out. So there's an article, and I do have the link in here, of the top 20 greatest inventions of all time. And this is according to him, so you could change the order, you could change your description, but it was an interesting read, and I kind of took it as a note. And by the way, this set of notes has been created not just by me, but by my students over the years. They've gone through and found things that I should put in, and you will do that today at the end of this set of notes. You too will have to find something to add to this that will make this set of notes better. Something that I don't have in, something I should have thought about. So, the greatest inventions of all time, the top 20 things that allowed humans to become us, aren't necessarily in chronological order. Okay? Well, maybe the first one is. So if we're going to go back to talking about what's made humans be what humans are today, we're going to go back to modern humans, Homo sapiens. Approximately about 10,000 humans. Basically, all of our genes and our gene pool can be traced back to these 10,000 original Homo sapiens. And that was at least, 200,000 years ago. We found evidence of clothing being used 170,000 years ago. So we were trying to stay warm. The most important invention of all time isn't a simple machine, but it is the control of fire. To be able to control it, light it when you need it. It allowed us to make tools like flint and strike it to get a spark. And that fire goes back, we've been using it for a long time, but to utilize it with the control is what really helps us. Because with fire, we get warmth, we get protection from the night. And a lot of other things like cooking, the ability to get nutrients out of food, allowed our brains to expand. It gives us an advantage over others. So, think about this. One of the differences in brain development is our jaw muscle. So who knew the fact that our master muscle, the one that controls our jaw, that allows us to go, open and close that, it's attached back about here. But in an ape or a chimpanzee, their brains don't have as much time to develop as ours do, because their muscle goes all the way and attaches at the back of their skull. And their skulls can't develop as long as ours do before they have to harden and protect their brain. So something like food that is easier to chew allow the development of this muscle to allow us to have better nutrients, to kill off some things that might be growing in there, to get more nutrients out of it, and allows us to have a bigger brain. Go figure. Thank you, fire. We're really in the Stone Age 100,000 years ago. You see wedges and other stone tools. Ceramics, 25,000 BCE. Domestication of animals were to be used and help humans, about 15,000 BCE. Now, BCE is something you're probably going to see in history. It's what I learned in all my history classes in college, because some people always say before someone and after the death. Well, you can't be born and die in the same year. And it's also centric to a certain population. So most historians will use BCE, which is before the Common Era. And AD means something, and it's Latin, and I don't remember what it is right now, but that's not the point. You can ask your history teacher for that. We're seeing bone needles used for thread, so we're starting to see the clothing, how we could start stitching things together. Those would have been probably skins at the time. 10,000 BCE. And remember, we're 2,000 years past that Common Era, so this is really 12,000 years ago, is the recession of the last glaciation. So humans are allowed to move farther north. Cave paintings in Europe at the same time. Evidence of harvesting grasses in Asia Minor, 9,500 BCE. Bows, arrows, and spears were really used for hunting at this point. It's depicted even in cave paintings. The first stone structures of Jericho. Evidence of sheep being kept in Iraq. In 8,000 BCE, our world population had gone from 10,000, 200,000 years ago, to 5 million. So we're growing. We're not living very long. I mean, if you make it to 30, you'd be old at this point. You want the specific dates, you can look it up for life expectancies, and I should put that in here, but maybe that's something you'll tell me I should add this year. But at the same time, we've discovered copper, and copper is important because it's a metal. It can hold an edge for a while, but it's soft enough that I can hit it with another stone or something and create it into the shape I want it to go to. I may have to sharpen it, I might have to redo it, but it gives me many more uses and a much more precise, kill shot. Let's go with that. Agriculture, now we're not just harvesting, we're not just domesticating animals, we're really starting to develop agriculture where we're staying in one place. Now that means we can have stuff. It means we're not nomadic anymore. But it also is really hard work. And this was not an easy, ask a farmer today, it's still not an easy job. And they've got big machines if they're lucky. They had hand tools and copper tools at that point. That would have been their advantage. But that was in Mesopotamia. We're also seeing pigs domesticated in China and Turkey at this point. Goats were domesticated in the Middle East. Clay vessels. Now this is not made on a potter's wheel. This would have been sculpted by hand. But if you start harvesting, you have to have a way to store all that food through the winter without it getting wet or molding. So they started using clay and terracotta, and with, often with figurines on the side. And we're seeing that in Western Iraq. We're starting to see bricks from clay in Jericho. The spindle of the spinning thread were evidence of this at this point. 7,500 BCE, we're seeing cattle domesticated, and the cat. Earliest pottery in the Near East. Farming now has spread to Mesopotamia in pretty big scale. Early form of knitting in modern Israel, 6,500 BCE. By 6,000 BCE, we've hit the Copper Age. Agricultural starts in Egypt, and so it's moving farther away from Mesopotamia, from the Middle East. Native Americans are using stones to grind their grain. Number 2 of the biggest invention is wheeled vehicles. Were first used in Mesopotamia about 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BCE. That means we could transport these goods and move them from place to place where we needed them without having to carry each piece or vessel all the time. We could actually use beasts of burden to do that. Rice was domesticated in China. Farming reaches the Atlantic coasts of Europe, so it's spreading. People began weaving baskets in 4,000 BCE because now clay vessels are heavy, right? If you can weave a basket that's quite strong and lightweight, you can put more stuff in it to carry in one trip instead of carrying all the weight of the clay vessel. People began making and drinking alcohol. And you're going to laugh at that, but it's because, think about this. There were bacteria. We know there's bacteria and things like that, and funguses that can grow in our foods and in our water, little algae and parasites. And so alcohol actually was a way, with the alcohol in it, that killed that stuff. It was safer to drink. A little more dehydrating, but safer. First leather pair of shoes were invented. We found diamonds in India, and we started liking them because they were pretty. And they were also hard so they could cut stuff. The plow was introduced in 4000 BCE. The oldest living non-colonial organism germinated, which is a big mouthful for saying this is something that came from a seed, not like where you take a sedum plant and snap it off and stick it in the ground and have it grown. That's a clone. So this is a seed, and that tree is technically still alive, and it germinated 5,000 years ago, along with bristlecone pines in Americas and other places. They're about 5,000 years old too. Dugout boats were used for transportation, so now we're not only transporting it with wheeled vehicles, but we're really going on. So this is where we get into some discrepancy on dates. So just bear with that there are some things we're not exactly sure of. But it is considered the second greatest invention. The wheel was invented in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE to be used in the creation of pottery. After about 3,000 years after that, the wheel was then put on chariots, and the rest is history. We used it for transportations. So there's some discrepancy where the wheel was actually invented, but the good news is it was. And here's that potter's wheel. So it went from that to there. First man-made glass in Mesopotamia and Egypt. I should check that typo one of these days and fix it. Now we've hit the Bronze Age. So now you take a little tin and you add it to copper, and we get an alloy called bronze, which is stronger than either of those alone. And we can get things like nails, the third biggest invention. We are going a little in chronological. We'll start skipping around a little bit. But right now, that was a big deal. The fact that we could fasten things together allowed us to build things like sailing ships. We can use wooden pegs, but we could also use iron or bronze nails at this point. Stonehenge is constructed. Now, this is where we're starting to see levers and ramps used to move heavy loads. The problem is, again, this is one of those things that there's some discrepancy on dates, because we don't have a lot of drawings of people who make like tower cranes, but we think they were used a lot longer, many more years before we thought they were. They just weren't ever making it into artwork. Now we're starting to see bigger sailing ships, wooden ships that were used to travel the seas, not just get across a lake or a creek. Now, big deal. First evidence of gold being used in the Middle East, and they were coins. And once you have money, because you have something that somebody else wants and you need something to trade for it, we've created a monetary system. And once you have a monetary system, you have to keep track of how much you've got and who owes you what. So, of course, cuneiform script came up in Mesopotamia. We found a way to write down, and this would have been on a clay tablet. And then we figured out papyrus and things like that could be used as an early form of paper, but that was papyrus reeds unfolded. Silk in China, 2850 BCE, first evidence of soap being used. So now we're starting to see the connection between body odor and getting rid of it, or how to clean other things to make them safer to use. Hemp cultivated for fibers in China. Hemp is an incredibly strong fiber. Henry Ford actually made an entire car body out of it, of hemp fiber. He thought it was the new beginning, but it threatened the wood and the cotton industry, so they basically illegalized it because it was too much of a competitor. It was stronger, but it's been used for a really long time. 2700 BCE, first recorded war between Sumer and Elam. Salt mines. We started realizing salt is something that we can use as a preservative and to enhance flavor. The Giza pyramids were constructed. Now we're entering the late Bronze Age. Horse-drawn vehicles were first used because we started domesticating horses. So now the wheel isn't being pulled by beasts of burden like ox or goats, but really by horses. Streamlined, a little easier to, well, not easier to control, but a little less massive, let's put it that way. Now we're getting into the spoked wheel. So here's another wheel, but now we realized if we don't have to have a solid piece of wood, we can use spokes. It makes the wheels lighter, a little more flexible, and that means instead of having the weight for the horse to pull in the wheels, we can put it in the goods in the cart instead. The development of our alphabet. Water treatments. We knew that things in the water can make us sick. We didn't know why. We didn't have a microscope to see all the microorganisms in there. but we have evidence of the first filtration systems. Sundials and water clocks were invented. Now we're getting into the Iron Age, so now we've discovered another thing, iron, and how to move it. And pulleys were first used 1500 BCE, glassmaking and bigger thing. Earliest compass 300 BCE. By 1000 BCE, we have gone up to 50 million in population. So as you get more agriculture, you can support more humans. They can live longer. They can have healthier lives. Maybe they were living till 35. Again, you have to go look at that. I should add that in. Somebody should put that in there. Not all of you, but I'll put that in, I think, is add in life expectancies, because I think that would be important to see. Again, we're seeing really big inclusion of those simple machines starting out, those inclined planes, the pulley, those things we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. The first Olympics, 776 BCE. Rome was founded in 753 BCE. 600 BCE, Thales discovers electricity. Benjamin Franklin did not discover electricity. He discovered that lightning is made up of electricity. That was the kite and key experiment. The ancient Greek philosophies really developed during this century, setting the foundation for Western civilization and our democracy. We're seeing the advent of the screw and catapult, 400 BCE. The horseshoe, Archimedes' laws of levers and pulleys. The screw that allowed us to put like this in a water and to crank the screw, and there was a cylinder that rotated up and it would pull the water up and dump it out at the top, so you could actually move water uphill. Modern compasses really using it. Some of these, I do have videos in here. You can go back and look at them. I may pull some of these out to have you watch, like the first Wright Brothers flight. I think you should see that. Paper. Now not just papyrus, but we've actually figured out how to make paper. It's the sixth greatest invention, happened in 100 BCE. And it allowed us to write down things and share ideas without having to go harvest papyrus or create a clay tablet. World population at 0 was 300 million. We've gone from 50 million to 300 million in a fairly short period of time. So we are seeing that the smarter we get about finding food, the more tools we have. We've gone to the Iron Age. The more we can create simple machines is allowing our numbers to grow. Now, I can tell you from my family, I do a lot of genealogy, and we're going to actually look at that and what these simple machines allowed even just for my family to do. They would have a lot of kids because before penicillin and things like that, if you had a firecracker go off in your hand and you got an infection, a lot of people died from the infections. People had big families because the statistics of survival were so bad that you needed to have quite a few to ensure that some would move forward. And often many did, but a lot of babies died as toddlers and infants from simple things like a cut on the finger. Tetanus. We didn't have a tetanus shot figured out at that point. We didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have penicillin. Now we're seeing more evidence of needles being moved all the way into South Africa. Again, they could have been bone, they could have been wood, but we're seeing sewing being a big deal. 79 AD, so now we've obviously come past, we're in our modern timekeeping period. Vesuvius erupts in 79 AD. Water wheels, somewhere between 1 and 500 AD. We know they came into Advent, and it allowed these jugs to go down and basically let the air out, put water in, and then it would come up to the top and bring water up from down lower. And eventually we figured out how to make water wheels turn machinery and use and harness that power. The Roman wooden planes. This is not like a plane that flies in the air or the plane of grass. This is a wood carver's plane that would shape. It had a blade in there to smooth wood and shape it into what we wanted it to look like. The Chinese invented the crank. This one happens to be Roman, but the actual creation is credited to China. And so is the wheelbarrow. Paper making, 105 AD. Now we're really looking at more, not just the fact that they figured out how to make paper, but to do it on much more massive scales, to have big production. The stirrup was invented, the repeating crossbow, backgammon was invented in Persia in 500, chess was invented in 600 in India, the first paper money in China. We're not using metal anymore. Now we've moved to paper because we were able to make paper. See, making paper on a massive scale allows you to do things like that. There are degrees you can get on paper. I mean, there's entire colleges, because to make paper, to make toilet paper, to make paper towels, to make paper money, all of that requires the use of chemistry and engineering. Gunpowder in China, not really used to, shoot people. That was when the West got it, but it was used to show a display of force, and it changed human history. By 1200 AD, our population is at 450 million. We're seeing eyeglasses being invented, so we're being able to control our glass. The fourth biggest impact on society was things like me. I can see everything right here close to me fine, but already even on the computer when I'm looking at myself and reading, if I squinted I could read the big words, but I'd have trouble even with the smaller ones. So this means that when I put these on, I can see danger coming at me from far away, and I'm less likely to be killed because of that. So eyeglasses were important. You didn't have to be led around. The printing press, the Gutenberg printing press in 1439, is the 8th biggest invention, because at this point, most people who were literate were in monasteries. They had the time to learn how to read. That was their expectation, that they would convey the knowledge to the masses. But your average person didn't know how to read. For one thing, they just didn't have time. They were subsistence living pretty much. They were farming to survive. And they didn't, they had to farm. They had to hunt. They had to figure out how to find their next meal and have shelter over their head, and all that, the stuff we need still today. But with the printing press, they could print books, they could print literature. Words became available to the masses, and people started to read. It wasn't just for as an elite group. The oven was invented in 1490. Do you guys realize the first mechanical invented was actually designed and created in 1565? That Bic pencil that you might use at some point has been around a really long time. Now it's just plastic. The microscope came around in 1593, so now we're actually starting to see what's in those water droplets that made us sick. And we were surprised that there was a whole world in there. By 1650, world population has hit 500 million. 1700, the piano was invented. Thank you, Beethoven and Mozart, all the beautiful music that we still get to have because of that advent. They had a tool to help them express their music. The fire extinguisher was patented in 1723. We've known about battery technology a long time, but a battery that's usable again and again, 1748. The 10th greatest invention of all time in 1763 was the steam engine by Scottish inventor James Watt. And you're going to learn more about James Watt, because one of our units coming up is actually called the Watt. So, world population by 1750 has hit 795 million. Again, Ben Franklin didn't discover electricity. He discovered lightning is made of electricity in 1752. The invention of the first machine-powered clock. The creation of the steam engine automobile capable of transporting humans. We didn't have to use a horse or anything else, or ourselves. Hot air balloons were invented. 13th greatest invention, we're starting to see vaccination. Scottish-born inventor, this is actually wrong, and I think the state is right, but we're going to get into the next one. But we're starting, I think this was we're going to find out about things with smallpox. I don't know how this transferred, but I need to fix that. The guillotine, because of course we have to find another way to kill people during the French Revolution in 1789. Glasses have been around now, but we're refining them in 1805. We're making better lenses. The plow. This is one of the first bikes. There is no pedal. How you move is more like a skateboard. You literally sit on it and steer, but you use your feet to make yourself move. But it was still less energy than walking. It gave you a little break. The first working train in 1822. The fan, 1830. Matches were invented in 1832. You take those for granted, but they haven't been around that long, a couple hundred years. Almost 200. Yeah. Telegraph allowed long-distance communication. The camera was introduced. The first icebox. This was a big deal for allowing people to store perishable foods. And literally, it was a box for ice. The top chamber, you would put in a big block of ice and it would slowly melt, but the cold would go down and keep your food down here cold, like a refrigerator, but it's an icebox. The artificial leg was introduced. Thank you, Civil War. We had to have, some way to deal with that. My grandfather actually had an artificial leg. In the 50s, I want to say, I think it was I don't remember what part of the 50s, he worked for the railroad company, might have been 40s, and a train wheel fell on his leg, and it got gangrene, and they had to amputate his leg, so he actually had a wooden leg. By 1850, the world population is 1,265,065,000,000 people. The Bunsen burner was introduced, the internal combustion engine, the 11th greatest invention that helped people. Now we've got more power, we can move heavier loads, we can move things like trains better, cars better, we can steamboats, all of these things are with an internal combustion engine, can just go a little farther. All right, first man-made plastic in 1862, the invention of the blue jeans in 1873 by Levi Strauss. The telephone was invented, the 12th greatest thing. Now we don't have to have somebody doing Morse code on a telegraph. We actually have the ability to transmit voice. I live in Bloomington, and not very far from me, there's everyone called it Telegraph Hill. And no one does to this day, but I know where it is because my dad always called it that, because when he was a kid, that's where the telegraph was. So the telephone, and this is one of the things I'll probably have you watch later, is the first recorded call. It's on a disc. Electricity and the light bulb invented in 1879. The birth of what we would start to consider the automobile that isn't steam driven. In 1885. This is the internal combustion engine. We took a carriage chassis and we mechanized it, and then it became what we see today. Thomas Edison and the hearing aid. Coca-Cola was introduced, and that was in 1885. Coca-Cola was originally a medication, and it had cocaine in it. Paperclip was introduced in 1890. The first escalator. Diesel engine. Pepsi came around a few years later. X-ray was discovered. World population in 1900 is 1,656,000,000. The first radio receiver. The first air conditioning was invented. And this might not look familiar to some of you. It will to your parents. But there used to be a department store called Dayton's, and they just put the Dayton sign back up. It since became Macy's. It's been bought and sold many times. But that company is still around today. You know it as Target. The founder of Dayton's actually was looking for a place to create this kind of market where he could have places to sell his goods, and Minnesota was a good place, so it actually was founded here. The Wright brothers, this is one important one I'm going to have you watch afterwards, the first flight. In 1903, we figured out how to conquer the air. The birds had already done it, now humans could. Same year, we figured out how to be able to drive when it rained with the first windshield wiper, where we didn't have to get out and continually clean it and get soaking wet. We've used tea, hot tea, for years, but the tea bag was invented that you could just take with you and not have to create your own, cheesecloth with, all the dried leaves in it. The tractor was invented. Einstein's theory of relativity, color photography in 1907. First piloted helicopter. The flat iron was introduced. The first successful set of headphones were created. The first electric washing machine. This is a big deal because, hang on, throat got dry. I have pictures of my grandmother washing clothes in there's literally on there an upside down wooden bucket. She would have had it the other way, filled with water and a washboard, and scrub the clothes on it. And in the winter, you would have to either hang it up in front of the fire, or you'd put it outside to freeze dry, and then you'd bring it in and to defrost it. But it freed up mostly women to do a lot of other things. Instead of spending half of their day doing clothes, they could put them in and move on and come back later. Bras were introduced now instead of corsets. That's a big advent. The first home refrigeration unit. So now this is an electric one. I actually have one of these at my cabin. It's got a big round compressor on the top. The first tank was used in war. They basically took a tractor and created this chain drive of wheels that could go in many different places. The first electric dryer in 1915. Stainless steel, the modern snowmobile. I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like any modern snowmobile to me, but it was at that point. And it was sleds with a motor and a drive chain. Adhesive tape, Scotch tape in 1920, the Band-Aid in 21, the first robot, the first 3D movie. Frozen foods came around. Who knew? But you could store foods for long periods of time without having to can. You just have to keep them cold. I bet you guys have some frozen foods, maybe, if you're lucky, in your freezer. Kleenex was invented. You didn't have to have a hanky. Television in 1926. The seventh greatest thing, modern rocketry. Pez has been around since then. Okay, here we go. Penicillin, not just inoculations like for smallpox, but penicillin was discovered by Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming in 1928, and that transformed medicine's ability to control infections, and it began the whole era of what we take for granted, which is our antibiotics. And with it, life expectancy drastically increased. If you put a firework off in your hand, you survive the burn, but you die from the infection. This stopped that. We have more people on the planet. Bubblegum, Double Bubble, has been around since 1928. Sunglasses. World population by 1930 is 2.07 billion. Really more of what we consider the invention of Scotch tape, the modern stuff, 1930. Contraception, so we could control birth rates. The first programmable binary computer took up like a whole room, like a classroom at school, plus probably another one. The first real helicopter that we would consider a helicopter today. The first tape recorder. Nuclear fission is the 18th biggest invention. That ability to not just break atoms apart, but then use that to fuse them together in the atomic bomb and our nuclear energy. Now we're seeing the first dishwasher. Duct tape came around in 1942. The first safe antibiotic was invented. So beyond penicillin, we're getting into more modern antibiotics. 1974, semiconductors are the 19th biggest invention that allowed us to really control and harness with silicone and semiconductors. Hence Silicon Valley gets its name today. And they contain semiconductors material was demonstrated in 1947. Go figure. The Frisbee's been around since 1948. Hairspray was introduced. Cake mix were introduced in 1949. In fact, they were so simple, all you had to do was add water and put it in the oven, and housewives at the time thought that was not right, so they actually took stuff out. So to this day, we have the remnant of the fact that they didn't think they were doing enough, so now we have to add water, oil, and egg. But before, you didn't actually have to do that. The nail gun was introduced, the first real color television, first nuclear reactor for harnessing energy, the defibrillator to restart a heart in 1952. IBM produced its first big computer. And then shortly after, 5 years later, we had the first video game. And then the development of the internet. Radio headphones were invented. By 1960, our population had reached 3,035,000,000. The first mini computer. Now that doesn't look very mini to me, but that was compared to a whole room's worth. The first successful heart transplant. That picture did not hold right because that was supposed to be up on another one. Weird. Microwave ovens were invented. The first game console, 1968. U.S. puts, by the way, this is the game console. That was where that was supposed to be, was down there. Man walks on the moon. Another thing I'm going to make sure you watch before we're done. You need to see that. VCR by Philips for the home. You could record things off television. We had floppy disks. You're so used to flash drives, or to be honest, just use the cloud. But before that, my first things in school were on these little floppy disks. And I remember using the big ones, and then the medium ones, and then those, and then eventually flash drives. The first portable cellular phone. Big, huge battery to power it. Big antenna. World population by 1975, 4,061,000,000. First personal computers. Apple's came out a year later with its Apple IIe. Or actually that might not be, but it was close. I can't remember if it's the Apple II or the Apple IIe. basically we're looking here at the MRI has been around since 77. The first 3D printer in 1980. Post-it notes. Cell phones, now a little more along the lines of what you would expect to see, but that was a big brick. It was like this big and about that thick, and you know, it was heavy. And they were expensive, by the way. High definition TV came about. The Super Soaker, the Smartboard, the first DVD player, PlayStation, genetically modified seeds. In 1995, the DVD was invented. So we had a player. A year later, we had and that wasn't invented. It was really mass marketing about the same time. Google has been around since 98. TiVo, 99. World population by 2000 was 6,115,000,000. 2001, we had the iPod, not a phone, just a thing that played music. Digital satellite radio. The Xbox. Since 2003, the Toyota Hybrid's been around. iTunes was invented. First camera phone, the first phone that had a camera on it. You take this for granted, but that was a big deal. And they weren't very good. I mean, they were pretty grainy. I've got some pictures from back then. Facebook has been around since 2004, and so have GoPros, YouTube, Twitter. The first Wii, the first iPhone. Now I've got this thing, which by the way is way more powerful than probably my first 3 computers put together. Pandora. Afghan War in 2010 became the longest war in U.S. history. Minions entered the scene, and so did Instagram. The 3D printer became much more portable, if you want to call it that, and available to the masses. It's just now starting to become where we actually have them in schools. 2013 world population is 7.134 billion, or 7,134,000,000. Mars rover finds life on Mars. We have the first video doorbell. Hover bikes, you can look at that if you want. They haven't really come into mass market, but they figured out how to harness kind of like a hovercraft technology into kind of like a bike. Amazon's Alexa's been around. TikTok. 115 world population is 7.291 billion. SpaceX uses its first reusable rocket in 2015. Tesla creates solar roofs. Self-tying shoes, the headset for virtual reality, Barbies that look like real girls, facial recognition, multi-directional elevators. People, you can go up, you can go over, you can go up, you can go down, you can go across, and you can go way up there. Multi-directional, wow. Smartphones got smarter. Mainstream of electric cars. I have a hybrid. It's becoming common. More than likely, by the time you're my age, you will probably not have a lot of gas combustion engines anymore. In 2020, the world population was 7.79 billion. A couple days ago, it was 7.842 billion, or 7,842,204,000. I actually watched it roll over. Projections for world population will be 9.4 billion by 2050 and almost 12 billion by 2100. And this is that population chart. This is from that same place of what's happening. And you can see survival, survival, survival. Okay, probably farming, industrial revolution, antibiotics, better farming, and our population explodes. So one of the things that you need to do on this assignment is thinking about the 20 greatest invention of all times. I want you in 5 words to explain how simple machines have shaped humans' journey through time. Just 5 words. Don't want a paragraph. Maximum of 5. Minimum of 5. 5 words. Find one new item that I should have included. So think of what is important to you that you use every day that is something that's a game changer. Not a fad, a game changer, and include that, and it might end up in this list for next year. I want to talk about the fact that as we had farming and we got more people, right? I want to look at how incredibly amazing it is that you get to be you. So we're going to look at my family, and one of my branches I can take back about 16 generations. And so let's look at this. And just how many people it took to make me be who I am. Okay, how many different genes I have from different people. Well, there's one me. I have 2 parents. I had 4 grandparents. I had 8 great grandparents, 16 great great grandparents. I'm just gonna say third grade's 32, fourth grade 64. You see how this starts to double. And by the time I get down here to my 12th generation or my 13th grandparent, this is 16 generations away, because remember, parents, grandparents, before we get into the greats. My 16th generation back, my great-grandfather, Brynhild, anyway, he was born in 1500. I don't even know how to say the last name, and it's my relative, but whatever. 16 generations back. 16 generations back, there are 65,536 people that had to couple up, find a life partner to create 32,768 marriages to create me. That's a lot of people to get to one little me. Isn't that really crazy to think about, the fact that 16 generations ago, I am the product of more than 65,000 people to get to you. Even if you go back to your great-grandparents, there were 8 of them. Great-great-grandparents, there were 16. Doubling. Have you seen that game 2048? Well, that's the doubling rule. It's what it takes to win that game. So think how many people it took to make us. And that's just going back 16 generations. There's a lot more back there. And the crazy thing is, if you go back in my history about 8 generations back, you start to see siblings marrying other siblings, not their own siblings, but so I actually have sets of grandparents that show up, or like great grandparents that show up on 2 different lines because their kids married other kids. This is me right here, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents. And this person right here is that 16th back generation, where there would be 65,536 people. Now, that's really interesting, right? Now, but think of how our population has exploded because of all the simple machines, because of the advent of things like the plow, of agriculture, of controlling fire, of penicillin, all of those things that have allowed us to live longer. We survive longer. We don't die as much young. We have things like car seats to protect us. We have, fire retardant pajamas so we can't catch on fire. So let's work the other way. We're going to only go back to my great-grandparents, Ida and Frank. Ida died at 102, and I knew her. And yes, this is dating me because she died in 1979, but she was born in 1867, and she was my great-grandparent. On my dad's side, my grandparents both of them were born in 1892, so they're off a half a step. So Ida and Frank are 2 people, right? So when Ida died, I was at the funeral, and I remember this to this day. I might be off by 2 or 3, but I'm pretty close. And if I have to find the obituary, but I haven't been able to find it. I think it's in paperwork my mom has somewhere. But I remember this for sure, because the first 3 are pertaining to me. Those 2 people had 12 kids because they worked on a farm. You needed help to get the farms to work. You didn't have modern tractors at that point. They had 56 grandchildren. That was my mom. That was her generation. My generation is the great-grandchildren. She had 103 great-grandchildren when she died. She had 7 great-great-grandchildren and 3 great-great-great-grandchildren. There's supposed to be another great in there. So when she died at 1979 at 102, her descendants were 181 people. Now, she passed away 45 years ago. This generation, my generation, has had kids. I'm old enough to be a grandparent. My kid, my grandparents, plus some of these kids are 20, 30 years older than me because of how, difference in age from the oldest to the youngest children and their family. I have no idea. I haven't actually done the genealogy backwards to find out that answer, but isn't that interesting? I mean, in 102 years, 2 people turned into at least 181. So people don't think humans reproduce, but we do. And that's what we see, the population growth. In fact, if you go onto that website, you can literally type up the, it's kind of like it's not a world clock, but it's a world population clock. And it's real time of how many people are dying and being born at the same time and what our population is because of that. So that's a little bit of population mechanics, a little bit of math, because I like math. But the one thing you need to do on this assignment is go through, give me 5 words and one thing you think I should have included. Thank you for listening. As always, if you need help or have questions, please ask.